But he that received one went and digged in the earth and hid his Lord's money. So we know that Jane had the same experience. She doesn't own the talent. She doesn't own the property. She's just a servant. She represents only the master. The goods are the master's. The goods are precious to the master. The goods are going back to the master. And so what does Jane want to do? She goes to glorify the master. Her Lord, her housekeeper, her estate. She is connected to it. And so she wants to bless him and show her love for him. And she takes the 2 that she's been given and she makes 2 more. She doubles what she had because she simply wants to glorify the master. But then we come to David, the third servant. Verse 18. He that had received one went and digged in the earth and hid his Lord's money. I think the parable is being just a little bit generous here. Because how long does it take you to dig a hole? And this isn't some grand hole. This is not a mine. This is not a cellar, a root cellar. This is not something elaborate. This is a hole. You take a shovel, you break the earth, you pull up the sod, you dig down 3 or 4 scoops. That's good enough. Toss it in, however big it might be. Big enough for it to be covered. And then you put the dirt on top of it and the sod back on top of that. And you try to say, okay, I'm 5 steps away from that and I'm 6 steps away from that. And, you know, the sun's shining right here. So I kind of have a bearing in the sky. And so you lay it out so you know where you put it. And you tap it down with the shovel, put your shovel on your shoulder and walk away. Say, yep, that's all that. And you go back home. Now, what did this servant do? Well, he was trusted to keep the talent, but what did he do with the talent? He tossed it in a hole. That's how much respect he had for the precious thing which belonged to the master. He dug a hole and he just dumped it in the hole and said, there you go. That'll be good enough. Cover it up. Remember where it's at. And I don't have to think about it anymore. So while the 1 talent, John, is out trading and making 5 more talents, and while Jane is out with her 2 talents, trading to make 2 more talents, David is out with his shovel, digging a hole, tossing the precious thing into the hole, and saying, whatever, it's not mine, it won't go anywhere, nobody knows where it's at, that's enough. That's sad. Maybe this fits into my category of one of the saddest statements in the Bible. But notice how it ends. He hid his Lord's money. He hid it. That's sad. What could he have been doing with it? He could have been glorifying his master with it. He could have been giving him something more. He could have shown his love, his appreciation. But no, he disrespects it. He dishonors it. So verse 19, after a long time, here's where watching comes in. David didn't watch. The other 2 did because they knew the master was going to come back. And they were going to have something for him when he did. So they're watching with those talents to do exactly what they need to do to glorify and honor their Lord when he returns. David, however, not so much. He's not watching. He doesn't care. Because he's got the stuff dug and is put in a hole. And when he comes back, he just give it to him. Whatever, here's your stuff back. Thank you very much for making me go out and dig a hole. You know how hot it was the day I had to dig that hole? Do you know how much I sweated when I had to dig that hole? It was nasty. It was a little muddy. And I had to dig a hole, put your stuff in it. So here's your stuff. You know, that's how much he respected what belonged to the master. So when his Lord came back, after a long time, he's had those servants come in and he was going to reckon with them. He's got to get his money back. Find out what happened while he was gone. Get the news from the neighborhood. So he that received the 5 talents came, this is verse 20, and brought other 5 talents, saying, Lord, thou deliverest unto me 5 talents. Behold, I have gained beside them 5 talents more. That's pretty good. Notice how excited this servant is. Listen to his language. Oh, Lord. He says, thou deliverest unto me 5 talents. Notice, behold. This said, oh, hey, look at here. You gave me 5. Look what I did with this. I made 5 more. Here it is, all for you. His Lord said unto him, well done, thou good and faithful. Notice those words, good and faithful. Good and faithful servant. You have been faithful over a few things. I will make thee ruler over many things. Enter thou into the joy of thy Lord. He also that received the 2 talents came and said, Lord, thou deliverest unto me 2 talents. Behold, I have gained 2 other talents beside them. His Lord said unto him, well done, good and faithful servant. Thou hast been faithful over a few things. I will make thee ruler over many things. Enter thou into the joy of thy Lord. So exactly the same reply. The first one who had 5, he doesn't get any more praise than the one that had 2. Why? Because the master knows exactly what the abilities of Jane are and exactly what the abilities of John are. And when they come back and they've doubled what he gave them, he says, you've been faithful over the little I gave you. Enter into the joy of the Lord. He doesn't say to John, you've been faithful over a bunch because I gave you a bunch, and so you're going to be over a bunch. And to Jane, he doesn't say, I gave you a little and you're going to be faithful over that. That's great, and I'm going to make you rule over a little. No. He says, I knew what you could do, and I knew what you could do, and guess what? You both did it to glorify me. I'll make you ruler over a lot, because what I gave you was just a little in comparison to what's going to happen. And then David comes in. Maybe he's still got his shovel with him, and he's got a dirty bag in his hand because he had to pull it up out of the ground. Verse 24. Then he which had received the 1 talent came and said, Lord, I knew thee that thou art an hard man. Whoa, wait a minute. What? What? He's probably got that talent hid behind his back. Notice how the others come in. They come in, oh, you delivered unto me 5 talents. You delivered unto me 2 talents. And they're holding it out. He's probably doing this. And he's got his head down. And he's kind of, moving from side to side a little bit. He's a little nervous. And he ought to be. And he says, Lord, I knew thee that thou art a hard man. What does that have to do with anything? What does the master have to do with the talents that he has delivered unto these servants? Reaping where thou hast not sown, gathering where thou hast not strawed. And I was afraid and went and hid thy talent in the earth. Lo, now notice the difference here. Notice how the other ones say, behold, looky here. I think this guy just kind of tosses out the dirty sack and says, there it is. Here. Whatever. There thou hast, that is thine. Whew. So, what he does is, he attributes his inadequacies to the master. Isn't that exactly what we do? Exactly what we do. We want to blame everybody else for our inadequacies, for our failures, for our weaknesses, for our sins. Let it be somebody else. And so the convenient person for him was the master, because the master was stern. He was stringent. He was tight. He had a firm hand on those that he was over. And he said, well, I knew what kind of man you were. Why would a servant say that to his master? What kind of madness has infected David's mind? That he would say that to his master, holding the master's talent in his hand. Why would he say, I know what kind of man you are. You reap where you haven't sown, where you haven't strawed. And I was afraid. What is he afraid of? What in the world is he afraid of? He should have been afraid. And the fear should have driven him to do something to glorify this great master of his. But what did he do? He hid it in the earth. And he even tells the master that he's not right here. But his not rightness here is because he's not right here. He hates his master. He says, I was afraid and went and hid thy talent in the earth. Like that's a good thing. Like that's an explanation for why he's not coming to him with 2 talents instead of 1. And you know the crime here is always the crime every time we read this. Will always be the crime every time the church reads this. Every time the church studies this. The crime is the master knew that David had several ability. The master knew that David was trustworthy. The master knew that David could handle 1 talent. And the master gave him 1 talent. All of that, ladies and gentlemen, is squandered by a man whose heart is not right, who goes and disrespects the goods of the master, tosses them, chunks them in the earth, covers it up, and then comes back and says, well, I knew what kind of man you are. Here it is. It's what you gave me. And that's exactly what we do with what the master has given us sometimes. Because we get so focused on everything else instead of our love for the master, don't we? Oh, so focused on everything else. What has he given you? You say, well, I don't know what my talents are. I don't know what talents the Lord has given me. You don't have to know what they are. But let me ask you a question. How can you glorify the Lord? What can you do to glorify the Lord of heaven? There's your talent. It's with that you can glorify him. And with every one of us, it's different. Because we all have several ability. Every one of us, he's entrusted his precious goods. Heaven's precious goods have been entrusted to each one of us. Are you, or have you ever been, glorifying God with those precious several abilities? If you haven't, then I would like to say to you this morning, you've done nothing more than this last servant who had the 1 talent. You've just chucked it in the earth, and you've hidden it, and you're just waiting for him to return so that you can blame him for your failure. And it won't be his failure, it will be yours. So why don't you dig that talent up today? Why don't you say, I am going to glorify God? It might be with my money. It might be with my property. It might be with my creativity. It might be with my industry. It might be with my mind. It might be with my time. It might be with my willingness. It might be with a whole host of things. Ladies and gentlemen, it would take me years and years to go through all because the human race is so diverse and we're so special and we have so many unique, wonderful things that he's given us as abilities. And we take those abilities and we add what he's given us to it and we glorify God. And if you are not seeking to glorify him in some way in your life, you are as this fellow David, who dug a hole, chunked it in the earth, and walked away. You don't care. You don't respect what God has given you. You don't respect how he's blessed you in this life. You just want it to be over with. Come quickly, Lord Jesus, is your everyday prayer. But you certainly don't want him to come back quickly. Because when you stand before him and you think you're going to accuse him, wrong. Servant, you're not the master. You're a slave. You've been bought with a price. He's given you of his goodness to glorify him with. That's our purpose. Period. And you'll notice that there are no servants in this story that are better or worse than each other. They don't know what their several abilities are because all they know is they get talents. They're different talents, but that's all they know. The master knows what their different abilities are, but he doesn't tell them that. He just gives them according to their abilities. Not one is better than the other. Each of them are trusted by the master. Each of them are given precious property by the master. And what they do with it is either glorify him or accuse him. The insanity. Oh, the insanity of accusing the master. His Lord answered him and said, "Thou wicked and slothful servant." You remember what he said to the other two? Good and faithful. This man is not good and faithful. This man is wicked and slothful. We understand what those words mean, don't we? You knew that I reap where I sowed not and gathered where I have not strawed. Thou oughtest therefore to have put my money to the exchangers, and then at my coming I should have received mine own with usury.